Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. So today, while we're waiting for the closing arguments and that sort of thing to go on, and I'll have an opportunity to break them down later, I wanted to do a couple of things. The first one of which is, in looking through the comments, I got a comment today that said, I really should dress more like a lawyer. And I can do this. I can put on an Oxford shirt and a tie and look more like a lawyer. I'm not sure that that necessarily makes my commentary any better, but if you guys think that's important, let me know in the comments, because I want to do what you guys need me to do in order to have this channel really do well. So if you think that's important, please let me know. I've had comments to the contrary where people said, I really like the fact that you don't look and sound like a lawyer. So we'll have to see which of those wins out, so to speak. Now, today we're going to talk about some of the comments that I've received on the Alex Murdaugh videos. And the reason we're going to do that is because a lot of times the comments are more interesting and actually more helpful than are the what I would call the talking heads, the people who get up here and pontificate, myself included in that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up some of these comments and I'm going to do voiceovers on them and tell you a little bit about what I think about each one of those, and then hopefully we'll have a fairly decent discussion about those particular comments. One of the things that makes this work so rewarding for me is the fact that people make comments that I have not thought of. And they focus on things that I didn't focus on. And in that way, what you have here is sort of a collective jury. You have a bunch of people making not only the content here on YouTube better, but it's also a much better focus group. You get a much better idea of how people think about these issues. And this is a good comment here. Tell me why those dogs were out of their kennels. If Alex gave a quail to Bubba, that would distract Mags and Paw Paw, giving him time to grab the shotgun. Well, I think that's an interesting take on what happened here. And again, I think that is something that we should focus on, but I wish that they had spent more time on it during the cross-examination. And so here is another good comment. A really good interrogator would have gotten a confession, but law enforcement and the prosecution were a long way from that. I don't think, even if you had F. Lee Bailey, Perry Mason, and Alan Dershowitz in some kind of clone, that they could have gotten a confession from Alex Murdaugh. He is a narcissist, and he is a manipulator and a liar, and he was not going to be dissuaded from that. If guilt had not caused him to confess before now, it certainly isn't going to confess. He's certainly not going to confess now when he's looking at the rest of his life in a jail cell, and that even though he faces potentially the rest of his life in jail for the financial crimes, it is unlikely that he will get the maximum for those financial crimes, even though he probably should. So I take a little bit of issue with the comment here, but I appreciate the way the commenter was respectful. I'm always amazed, too, by how kind and thoughtful people are in producing long comments like this that deal with a multitude of issues. I think there is some element of the Big Daddy thing here, the Tennessee Williams South. And I think no matter how this trial has an outcome, there are going to be people who wonder exactly how much influence the Murdaugh name and the Murdaugh family reputation played in that outcome. It could work both for and against Alex Murdaugh because, for one thing, if indeed he is held to a higher standard because he is a pillar of the community, then the fall from the pillar can be quite devastating. On the other hand, if he gets a break and people aren't just not going to believe that he did anything until there's a proof or a photograph of him with a video blowing them away, then I think it probably works against the state in this case. I think we're probably going to find out when we get a verdict, and hopefully we will find out if the jurors agree to talk to the media after they're done. Now, they don't have to, and in some cases they probably shouldn't, but at least that is their option. Now, here are three short but very important comments. The first one, I think Alec hated Paul for all the consequences of the boat wreck. I think that's absolutely true. The sins of the father and the sins of the son are pretty much the same sin. Both of them were overindulging in substances, and that's the cause of both of their problems here, I think. And then Deb Clausen says, look, I really need to know about the guns and the bloody clothes. If there was no accomplice, how much time did Alex have to hide them? And as brilliant as he is, how could he hide them where we can't find them? Well, I don't know the answer to that last question, but clearly he was able to hide them, or someone was, and maybe he did have an accomplice, but that doesn't lessen his guilt. And if he had an accomplice and he wanted to get benefit for that, he should have thrown him under the bus. And then this last comment is the one I think that's probably the most troubling for me. He says, known a lot of stone-cold junkies, never seen one obliterate their family. Terrible comparison. Well, I'm not suggesting that all junkies are, family annihilators, as to use Creighton Waters' words. But what I am saying is that this particular comment is like saying, I've driven a lot of cars, I've never had the brakes fail, therefore there can't be any car where the brakes fail. And we all know that that's just not true, because brakes fail all the time. I would point out that Richard Ramirez, the supposed Night Stalker from L.A., was also an addict, and as a result, a killer. I think the message here is that anybody can be a killer, whether they're an addict or not, but addicts are certainly not immune to being killers by virtue of being addicts. And again, the interesting thing here on these comments is that people disagree. And here we have two people saying, look, it's going to be a hung jury. And, they may very well be right, because they've proved he's a liar, but they haven't necessarily proved he's a killer with the kind of facts that some people are going to require. But again, this is where the Murdaugh family name comes in, and it's also where any animosity that people have toward the family name come in. So the middle comment there says, I might be wrong, but I think he didn't say the name of either of them during the interview in the car. Again, these are the kind of perceptive comments that really add something here. Using pet names now is a show, and if I was on the jury, it would annoy me badly. It would not only annoy me, it would illustrate to me that he was trying to play me, and I think that's what he is trying to do. Before we get to this next comment here, I want to point out something that we always say, that a deposition is much different than a trial. And the testimony that you get in a deposition, a lot of it becomes inadmissible because the question wasn't asked right. But you can still get the answer in if somebody denies that they said something. So it's very, very interesting to me to watch the way people pick up on things. So with that prelude, here is the comment. The prosecutors wanted Alex to ramble to give the prosecutors time over the weekend. The question is, how sharp will the prosecutors be on Monday? I think that's a question we're going to find out today, and I hope that the answer is razor sharp, but we'll have to see. And then here's another person disagreeing. They think that he's guilty, but he's not going to be proven guilty, and that there's going to be a hung jury. And there may very well be. So here we have somebody saying, look, the prosecution wanted this guy to ramble. They wanted him to give him enough rope to hang himself. And I think there's some truth in that. And the reason that I think that's not necessarily a good strategy, it might be a good strategy with somebody who is a stumblebum from, the sticks, but it's not going to be a good strategy with someone like Alex Murdaugh, who can take that room and weave his little narrative. But I do think that in some respects, the commenter here has a point. And that is that people tend to fill the silence. One of the things that I often did when I took depositions is I would ask a question that I already knew the answer to based on the medical records, and I would wait for the doctor or the nurse to answer it. I once asked a question of a nurse, something to the effect of, you saw what the blood pressure is, you now have looked at all of this information. You know, don't you, that when you put him up on the commode, that probably killed him. And she said, no, no, that's not what happened. And I just looked at her like this. I gave her what my kids used to call the really look. I said, really? And after a couple of moments, she said, well, I guess it is possible. So I looked at her again and she said, yeah, that's what happened. Silence is powerful because it makes people feel uncomfortable. And so our commenter here has probably a good idea as to, why they might have let him ramble on the stand. But the problem here is that I think Murdaugh probably just, I think he probably just was a little too smart for that. He wasn't going to continue to run. He did sometimes continue to talk well after the question had been answered, but usually that was to spin his own narrative. Now, here's kind of a pithy comment that made me laugh. This person says, look at the difference between you and Creighton Waters. He is fiercely seeking justice for those who are victims. You're trying to make a living being critical on YouTube. I think I'll go with AAG Waters. Okay, I don't doubt that he is trying hard to get to the result that he believes is just. And I wasn't really trying as much to criticize Creighton Waters as simply show how it could be done better. Now, I'm an appellate lawyer. It is literally my job to look for errors, point them out, and again, explain how things could have been done better or why evidence matters one way and not another. I'm not trying to make a living on YouTube. If I did, I'd be eating a lot of tuna fish and mayonnaise. But I'm not, and I'm just here trying to provide some comment and some commentary that people might find useful. But thank you for your comment, and I'm sorry that my analysis disappointed you. And here is another prescient comment. He says he's not being truthful about anything, especially his drug addiction. I promise you he couldn't have built up a tolerance high enough to take that many pills and function. I think that's absolutely true. I think the idea that he was taking that much oxycodone is just ridiculous. And I'm surprised they haven't pushed back on that, but perhaps they will in closing argument. And this comment here shows why juries are such a powerful force in finding the truth. She says, I've been enthralled. I'm praying for justice. I think Waters did a good job on his cross-exam. I was hoping he would hone in on the possibility of Paul's boat crash damaging the Murdaugh name and the fact that Maggie and Paul knew too much and was giving him grief as possible motives for murder. Alex Murdaugh is pouring on the innocent facial expressions and tone of voice pretty heavy. I'm not buying it for 1 second. This is often how jurors think and act. They look at the overall and they make a decision on the basis of what they see in the person who is testifying. And I think all of these insights are worthwhile. And then this, I think, is also one of those things that drove me a little nuts. It drives me nuts with the weird neologisms he pushes on others. It's supposedly Alec instead of Alex, Murdaugh instead of Murdaugh, and then suddenly starts using baby talk nicknames for everyone while on the stand. Paw Paw and Row Row, and it's like something a 6-year-old would do, not a fully grown man. Ugh. And then the comment below that, circumstantial case is strong. And I would agree that the issue of Paul's gun being stolen and the fact that all of those guns are missing is something that points very strongly to someone who knew where those guns were, how to get to them, and had a plan for what to do with them afterwards because the plan has been very successful. Again, that's the kind of thinking that someone who is very precise and used to dealing with legal issues might come up with. And several commenters pointed this out, and I think it's really important, and I'm surprised that I missed it. She says, there was also a time Alex let slip that Maggie asked me to leave, and then he was trying to fix it by saying, asked me to go with her. Well, leave and go with are two different directions. So that's an inherently contradictory statement. Again, you guys have been so good at picking up on the minutia of this case, you guys should be a permanent, basically a permanent focus group for the prosecution. They should come and produce their case for you and let you decide how it should be argued. You guys have done a really good job on this case. As I went through the comments this morning, I was very impressed with all the things that I missed and you guys picked up on. You guys did a really good job. I do believe that there is a great deal of value in YouTube as a community, and I am really surprised that more trial lawyers don't make use of it. Now, I do think they made use of it in the Amber Heard case. I think both sides did, and they kind of tuned their presentations based on what those comments were saying. The problem that you sometimes run into is that you never know which comments are the most important, and I think in this case almost all of the comments were spot on. And yeah, even those people who criticized me, look, I can be as pretentious and knuckleheaded as anybody else. I have my opinion, I believe my opinion, but I was really not trying to throw rocks at Creighton. I was just trying to explain why I thought he could do things a little bit better and how I might have planned out that cross-examination using materials that I use frequently in continuing legal education. You can't judge a lawyer's performance by what he does in one trial. And I have to tell you, there has never been a trial that I was involved in where I didn't make at least one mistake. And I don't think that any lawyer could say that they have gone through a trial and been mistake-free. The only question is whether or not those mistakes wound up in losing or winning the case. I do believe that in this particular case, the prosecution did the best it could with what it's had. And as I mentioned in one of the comments that I replied to, I would give Creighton Waters a B+ on this. I mean, I think he would have gotten an A if he had kept his cross-examination shorter and more focused. But as it was, I think he got a great deal of information that when the jury sits down to deliberate this case is going to weigh very heavily on their minds. So with that postscript, I want to thank everybody who commented. If I didn't respond to your comment or mention your comment here on this video, it's not because I didn't read your comment. I try to read all of them, but I think there were over 100 comments this morning on this video, and there have been hundreds of comments on the other videos that I've done on the Murdaugh trial. So thank you again for contributing to the channel. Thank all of you who have subscribed. I'll try to earn your subscription every day. And if you could, give me a reading on whether or not I need to wear this silly monkey suit or whether I can dress like a normal human being. If I can dress like a normal human being, I would really appreciate that. But if you think it's more important, you be honest and tell me. Thank you again for watching. I hope you all have a marvelous day and be kind to others out there. We'll catch you next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.